Sometimes the most painful goodbyes aren't loud. They're the ones you never hear coming. He thought she'd always be there until the day she wasn't. She gave more than she took and you didn't notice. It sounds simple, but if you sit with it long enough, it hits like a quiet truth you weren't ready to face. There are people who move through your life without asking for anything extraordinary, just honesty, effort, and a little presence. But she wasn't one of those people. She didn't take up space, she filled it with warmth. She didn't demand attention. She earned it by being there in ways that never felt heavy, never felt like a task. Her giving wasn't grand or theatrical. It was steady, consistent, the kind that wraps itself around your daily routine until it becomes invisible, until it's gone. You know the kind of giving I'm talking about, the type that doesn't announce itself. It shows up in tiny, quiet gestures. She remembered things you forgot about yourself, like the way your voice changed when you were tired or how you distracted yourself when you were anxious. She knew when to talk and when to let silence do the healing. She knew how to show love without needing credit. And somehow, in the middle of all her giving, you convinced yourself you had time to reciprocate, time to appreciate her, time to say the words you thought she already knew. There's a strange human flaw we all carry. We learn the value of gentleness only after we lose it. The world trains us to recognize loud love, grand gestures, attention-seeking affection, but it rarely teaches us how to identify the love that whispers, the kind that cooks you a meal, not because it's special, but because she knew you didn't eat all day, the kind that listens to you talk about your failures without judgment, the kind that sees your rough edges and doesn't try to smooth them, just tries to understand where they came from. And the truth is, you never asked for her to give so much, but she did. Not because you deserved it at the time, but because that was her nature. She came into your life like someone who had already learned the cost of loving too deeply, and yet she still chose to give. People like that are rare. They're the type who love you in moments when you don't even love yourself. There's a moment you remember clearly, even if you pretend you don't. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of scene you see in movies. It was something simple. Maybe she asked how your day was while you were distracted, or maybe she reached for your hand and you were too caught up in your own thoughts to take it. It was one of those moments where she tried to connect and you brushed it off without meaning to, and she didn't complain. She didn't get angry. She just withdrew a little, quietly, almost unnoticeably. It was the first sign that she was tired of giving into an empty space. But you didn't notice. Not then. It's strange how the mind works. We tend to remember the big fights, the sharp words, the moments when something breaks loudly. But the real endings don't happen in noise. They happen in silence, when someone stops contributing pieces of their heart because they no longer feel safe handing them over. She didn't stop giving out of spite. She stopped because she had reached the point where giving felt like losing parts of herself. Still, you didn't notice. You assumed her kindness was a renewable resource. That no matter what you did, no matter how distracted or distant you were, she'd always find her way back to you. You assumed that the love she poured into you wasn't costing her anything. But love always costs something. It costs time, emotional energy, vulnerability. It costs hope that the person receiving understands what they're being trusted with. Every time she forgave you, every time she showed up, every time she gave you the benefit of the doubt, she was choosing you at the expense of something else. And you didn't see it. You thought her strength meant she would never break. You thought her loyalty meant she would never leave. There's a story you hear sometimes about how a person doesn't realize how much weight someone else was carrying until the day the weight hits the floor. It's a familiar pattern in relationships. One person carries the emotional load, planning, caring, checking in, remembering, managing the little things that keep the connection alive, while the other drifts through, comforted by the illusion that everything is fine. And when the day comes that she finally sets down that weight, it feels sudden, but it wasn't sudden to her. She saw it coming a long time before you did. You ever notice how people who give the most are often the ones who apologize first? She did that. She apologized for your bad days. She apologized for your silence. She apologized for the moments that weren't even her fault, and you accepted it because you didn't understand what those apologies meant. They weren't admissions of guilt. They were signs of love, signs that she valued the relationship enough to take responsibility for things that weren't hers to carry. It's only when she stops apologizing that you understand the truth, when she stops explaining herself, when she stops trying, when she stops showing up in the ways she once did, when the texts get shorter, when the calls don't come, when her voice loses the warmth you didn't realize was there until it wasn't. That's when it finally hits you that she was giving pieces of herself while you were giving excuses. And suddenly you're left with the quiet realization that you had someone extraordinary, someone who gave more than she took, and you treated her like it was normal, like it was deserved, like it was endless. But nothing good stays endless, especially not a heart like hers. The painful truth is, she didn't want much. She wanted effort. She wanted presence. She wanted partnership instead of passiveness. But the world has conditioned people to overlook the priceless things because they come wrapped in simplicity instead of spectacle. Her love wasn't flashy, but it was real. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. And if you've ever lost someone like that, you know the silence they leave behind echoes louder than any argument ever could. The day you realize what she gave is the day you finally understand what you lost. By then, the door has closed softly behind her, without drama, without noise, and you're left standing in the empty space she filled so quietly, wishing you had noticed the value of what you had before it slipped through your fingers. Because people like her don't come back, and even if they do, they never return the same. She saw potential in you, not just problems, and if you've ever been on the receiving end of that kind of vision, you know it's a staggering thing, because most people look at you through the lens of what's wrong, what needs fixing, where you fall short. They see the cracks, the mistakes, the flaws. They see the surface level version of you, the one shaped by insecurities and past failures. But she looked past all of that, past the armor you wore, past the rough edges you pretended were strength. She saw something deeper, something you didn't even dare to see in yourself. There's a particular kind of silence that comes when someone believes in you wholeheartedly. It's not loud or demanding. It doesn't pressure you to be perfect. Instead, it's this steady, unshakable presence that tells you, I see more in you than you see in yourself. And for a while, you didn't know how to handle that. You weren't used to someone looking at you like you were capable of becoming someone better. You weren't used to being seen, not like that, not with hope instead of doubt. People talk about love like it's this big, extraordinary thing, fireworks, dramatic gestures, speeches that change the world. But sometimes love is quiet belief. Sometimes it's someone holding your broken pieces and saying, these aren't flaws, they're parts of your story. And that's what she did. She saw your potential, not the polished version, but the raw, unrefined truth of who you could be, not the version shaped by fear, but the one shaped by possibilities. You remember the early days, don't you? When you told her about your dreams, the ones you barely whispered to yourself, the wild ideas you were too afraid to pursue, the ambitions you kept tucked away because the world had already told you they were unrealistic, and she didn't laugh. She didn't tell you to be practical. She didn't give you a list of reasons why it wouldn't work. Instead, she leaned in. She listened. She took your dreams seriously because to her, they were reflections of your soul, not just fantasies. There was a moment. You might not talk about it out loud, but it lives in your mind. You were doubting yourself, questioning everything, ready to give up. Something had gone wrong, maybe a setback at work, maybe a mistake you couldn't stop replaying. And she looked at you with this calm certainty and said something simple like, "You're better than this moment." And you believed her. Not because you suddenly became confident, but because she made you feel like maybe, just maybe, you weren't as lost as you thought. She didn't see your problems as limitations. She saw them as transitions, temporary storms you were strong enough to weather. When you fell apart, she didn't tell you to get it together. She sat with you in the pieces. When you shut down emotionally, she didn't walk away. She waited patiently, letting you open up at your own pace. When you saw yourself as a mess, she saw you as a work in progress, and she knew progress takes time. There is research from psychology that says people grow faster when they are believed in by someone they trust. It's called the Pygmalion effect, the idea that someone's belief in you can elevate your performance, your mindset, your entire trajectory. And she was living proof of that. She didn't push you. She lifted you. She didn't demand you become someone better. She encouraged you until the better version emerged naturally. She saw the way you avoided your own reflection sometimes, the way you carried guilt from past relationships, past mistakes, past versions of yourself that you were still trying to outrun. But she didn't turn those into reasons to leave. She turned them into reasons to stay. Not out of savior complex, not out of obligation, but because she recognized something in you, the spark of someone who could grow, who could rise, who could transform into the person they always wanted to be. And yet, you didn't understand the weight of her belief while you had it. You took it for granted. The way she spoke life into your ideas, the way she reassured you after failure, the way she celebrated your small wins like they were monumental. It was her way of saying, "I'm with you, not just for who you are, but for who you're becoming." It's funny how we often don't recognize the people who see our light until we're standing alone in the dark. Because the day she stopped seeing potential in you wasn't the day she stopped loving you. It was the day she realized you didn't want to grow. Potential is a two-sided thing. Someone can see it in you, but you still have to choose to reach for it. And after a while, even the strongest soul gets tired of pulling someone toward a future they refuse to walk toward. There were signs you missed, little moments when her encouragement sounded quieter, times when she asked how you were doing and your answer barely reached her, times when she celebrated you and you brushed it off like it was nothing, times when she pushed you to go after something bigger and you pushed back without even noticing the effort she was making. You didn't see that belief takes energy. It takes emotional investment. It takes heart. Every time she chose to see the best in you, she was using a part of herself. She was pouring into you from a well she sometimes had to refill alone. And you didn't realize that her belief in you was a gift, not a given. But the true turning point wasn't dramatic. She didn't walk away shouting. She didn't make speeches about how tired she was. She simply began to withdraw her belief piece by piece until one day it wasn't there anymore. You felt it long before you understood it. The way her voice lacked the warmth it once carried. The way her eyes didn't shine with the same pride when she looked at you. The way she stopped dreaming out loud with you. Because she had learned something painful. She couldn't want your future more than you did. And that's when you realized the depth of what she had given you. Belief, vision, hope, encouragement, a mirror that reflected not your mistakes, but your potential. And you realize too late that this kind of belief is rare. Most people will point out your failures. Few will remind you of your possibilities. Even fewer will walk beside you while you try to reach them. She saw potential in you, not just problems. And losing someone like that teaches you something profound. Having a person who believes in you is one of life's greatest blessings. Because once they're gone, you're left looking at yourself through your own eyes, not theirs. And that's when you finally Understand the power of someone who loved you for who you could be, not just who you were. She loved with depth, not drama. And that kind of love, it moves differently. It doesn't crash into your life like a storm demanding attention. It doesn't come with noise or theatrics or emotional fireworks designed to overwhelm you. It arrives quietly, almost shyly, settling into the spaces of your life the way a sunrise settles into a dark room, soft, warm, undeniably transformative. You don't always notice it at first because it doesn't try to be noticed. It tries to be felt. Her love wasn't a performance. It wasn't crafted to impress anyone. It wasn't meant to be displayed, photographed, or turned into a story for others. It simply was real, present, alive. She loved you in the little spaces where most people don't think to show up, in the quiet mornings when you weren't at your best, in the late night hours when the world felt too heavy and your heart felt too tired, in the moments when you were closed off, guarded, or uncertain. She didn't walk away from those parts of you. She leaned in, gently, patiently. And the thing is, she didn't make loving you feel like a battlefield. She didn't use drama to measure passion. She didn't weaponize her feelings. She didn't raise her voice to be heard. She wanted connection, not chaos. She wasn't trying to teach you how much she cared through emotional explosions. She taught you through consistency, through tenderness, through understanding that outlasted frustration. Her depth showed in the way she remembered the details, how your eyes shifted when you were lying to yourself, not to her, how your silence had different tones, one for sadness, one for anger, one for exhaustion. She knew the difference between your "I'm fine" that meant "leave me alone" and the one that meant "I don't know how to ask for help." She didn't just listen to your words, she listened to your pauses. That's what depth looks like. That's what love feels like when it comes from someone who's done the inner work, someone who chooses presence over performance. But you didn't recognize the value of that, not fully, because we're conditioned by movies, by broken relationships, by past emotional scars, to believe that drama equals passion. That if someone isn't raising their voice, slamming doors, or demanding something loudly, it must mean they don't care enough. You mistook her calmness for indifference. You mistook her depth for distance. You mistook the stability she offered for simplicity, when in reality, stability is one of the most difficult gifts a person can give. You notice the kind of partners people boast about, the ones who fight, cry, storm out, come back, break things, make up, break again. The roller coaster, the chaos, the emotional high that only exists because the lows are so devastating. That's not depth. That's addiction disguised as passion. She knew that. She lived beyond that. She wasn't chaotic because she had learned something that takes some people years to understand. Love doesn't have to hurt to be real. It doesn't have to be loud to be strong. It doesn't have to break you to be meaningful. She didn't want to leave you breathless with fear. She wanted to breathe with you, grow with you, build something with you that wasn't always on the verge of collapsing. And maybe that scared you, because real intimacy, the quiet, deep kind, asks you to show up fully. No armor, no games, no manipulation, just truth. She offered vulnerability, not volatility. She asked for honesty, not theatrics. She wanted conversations, not confrontations. And sometimes that felt foreign. You were used to preparing for the next argument, but she wasn't trying to fight you. She was trying to understand you. There's a moment that probably comes back to you sometimes, a moment when she looked at you with softness in the middle of your frustration, your defensiveness, your distance, and instead of matching your intensity, she simply said something like, "Talk to me," and it disarmed you. Because people who love with drama escalate. People who love with depth create space. But here's the thing about people who love like that. They need depth in return. They need emotional presence. They need effort, not excuses. They need partnership, not someone who confuses peace with weakness. When you didn't meet her halfway, she didn't lash out. She didn't create chaos to get your attention. She simply began to retreat internally, the way deep souls do when they feel unseen. It wasn't a sudden shift, it was gradual, a soft dimming. Her voice lost some of its lightness. Her laughter didn't come as easily. She stopped asking questions about your day, not out of anger, but out of resignation. She had given you depth, but depth can't live where it isn't nourished. And you didn't notice at first, not until the distance became undeniable, not until her silence felt heavier than any argument would have, not until you woke up one day and realized that peace had been replaced with emptiness. Drama announces itself loudly when it leaves. Depth leaves quietly. It's the kind of departure you don't hear until the absence becomes unbearable. The truth is, she didn't want to be difficult. She wanted to be understood. She didn't want intensity at the cost of emotional safety. She wanted connection, the real kind, the kind that lasts beyond the initial spark, the kind that grows roots and stays. She wanted someone who could sit with her in silence and not feel uncomfortable. Someone who valued calmness, someone who saw that loving without drama isn't boring. It's secure, it's stable, it's mature. But instead, her depth felt too subtle for you then. You didn't realize that she loved you not with noise, but with intention, not with chaos, but with commitment. And one day, when she finally stepped away, quietly, gracefully, the way she did everything, you felt the difference more than if she had slammed a door or screamed. You felt it in the way the room stayed still where her energy used to vibrate. You felt it in the way the peace she gave had become something you depended on without ever acknowledging it. You felt it in the way you suddenly missed the gentle things, the conversations that mattered, the comfort she offered without being asked, the calm that she carried like a gift. You realized too late that drama is easy. Anyone can create it, but depth is rare. Depth is a treasure disguised as simplicity. And losing someone who loves that way leaves an ache that drama never could. Because the absence of chaos isn't emptiness. It was her love. And now, without it, you understand what she really gave. A space where your heart could rest. A space you didn't honor until she no longer stood in it. She walked away with dignity, not revenge. And there's a certain quiet power in that, a kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't break things on the way out, doesn't leave behind a trail of destruction. It's the strength of someone who has learned that not every battle needs to be fought and not every hurt deserves a counterstrike. Some people choose to reclaim their peace instead of proving a point. She was one of them. You remember the way she carried herself near the end. There was no chaos in her step, no bitterness in her voice, no desperate attempt to make you feel what she had felt. She didn't throw your mistakes back at you like weapons. She didn't demand you acknowledge every moment she had been wounded. She didn't stand there waiting for an apology she knew she might never get. She simply looked at the reality for what it was, honestly, quietly, and accepted that she deserved better than what the situation was giving her. That's the thing about dignity. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need you to understand it in the moment. It stands on its own, and she stood on her own. It didn't happen suddenly. People assume the decision to walk away is a single moment, a dramatic exit, a slammed door, a broken cry. But the truth is, people leave emotionally long before they leave physically. She didn't walk out because of the final argument or the last disappointment. She walked out because of all the moments in between. The ones you brushed off, the ones you thought didn't matter, the ones where she tried to talk, tried to explain, tried to meet you halfway, and found no one standing on the other side. You didn't recognize the shift at first. You thought she was just tired, having a bad week, needing space. But it wasn't exhaustion, it was clarity. She was realizing she had spent so much time trying to make things work that she forgot what it felt like to be appreciated without effort. She began to understand that someone who truly values you doesn't need to be chased, convinced, or reminded of your worth. And she wasn't trying to punish you. She wasn't trying to win. She wasn't trying to make you regret anything. She was trying to save herself. Revenge would have been easier. It always is. Anger gives you energy. It makes you feel powerful, even if the power is temporary. But dignity requires composure. It requires restraint. It requires accepting the pain without letting it turn you into someone you're not. She refused to let your actions define her reaction. That's not weakness, that's control. That's emotional intelligence. That's the kind of strength most people only understand in hindsight. There's a moment you probably replay in your mind, the moment she finally walked out. She didn't yell, she didn't accuse, she didn't list every way you had hurt her. She simply said something simple, something almost too calm. Something like, I can't do this anymore, or this isn't good for me, or I need to let go. Her voice didn't shake. Yours might have, because that's when it hit you. She wasn't trying to hurt you. She was done trying to save something you weren't holding on to tightly enough. And you felt the difference. You felt it in your stomach, that sinking feeling that comes when someone chooses themselves after spending so long choosing you. For the first time, you understood that losing someone's effort is one thing, but losing their presence, losing the way they once believed in you, the way they once looked at you, that hits differently, that hits deeper. You might have expected some kind of aftermath. Maybe you thought she'd come back. Maybe you thought she'd send one final message, something fiery or emotional, but she didn't. She didn't stalk your social media, didn't call your friends, didn't try to make you jealous or prove how happy she was without you. She didn't play those games. She just moved forward. That's what dignity looks like. It moves in one direction, ahead. Sometimes you catch yourself wondering how she did it, how she held everything together without lashing out, without letting the pain twist her into someone spiteful. But that's because her love had been genuine. She didn't want to destroy you. She merely wanted to stop destroying herself by staying. There's something you learn when you watch someone leave like that. You realize that the quieter the exit, the louder the lesson. She didn't need to break you to make her point. Her absence would do that on its own, not out of cruelty, but because losing someone who leaves with grace forces you to confront the parts of yourself you avoided while they were still there. You start to notice the small things first, the silence where her voice used to be, the lack of messages where her check-ins once filled your phone, the way your victories feel emptier without her celebrating them, the way your bad days feel heavier without her steady presence anchoring you. And somewhere in that quiet, you understand why she left. Not because she stopped caring, but because caring alone wasn't enough. Not because she wanted to hurt you, but because staying was hurting her. Not because the love was gone, but because love without respect, without attention, without effort, eventually becomes self-betrayal. She wasn't willing to betray herself anymore, so she walked away with dignity, not revenge. And if you see her someday, moving on glowing from the peace she found, living in the softness she always carried, you'll recognize something you didn't fully see before. She didn't leave to punish you. She left to protect the part of her that still believed in love. And she took that part with her. You might ache at that realization. You might wish there had been a fight, something dramatic, something that gave you permission to feel angry instead of responsible, but she didn't give you that out. She didn't give you a villain to point at. She didn't give you a moment to say, look what she did. She gave you truth. She gave you silence. She gave you the clean break that only strong people know how to make. Because at the end of the day, revenge is loud and messy. But dignity echoes. It stays long after the door closes. It teaches you something about yourself, something uncomfortable, something necessary. She walked away with dignity, not revenge. And that's how you know it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finally choosing herself. Something you didn't do for her, but she finally learned to do for herself. There's a strange thing about certainty. We treat it like a guarantee, like the sunrise, like gravity, like breath. We assume some people will always be there, always waiting, always forgiving, always understanding. We confuse their consistency with permanence, as if their heart is a place we can return to whenever life gets too loud or too heavy. And sometimes by the time we realize what that heart truly meant, it's already gone. And that realization hits with a kind of quiet force that feels almost cosmic. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's just this deep, cold awareness that you misread someone's presence as a given. And that's the moment he understood, far too late, that she wasn't like anyone else. He thought she'd always stay because she was the kind of person who loved without keeping score. She was patient in ways that didn't make sense to him. She showed up even when it was inconvenient, even when she felt unappreciated, even when he gave her every reason to give up. You know how some people walk into your life and you don't realize they're carrying the weight of both your hearts? She did that effortlessly. She carried the emotional load, the conversations, the healing, the soft reminders, the hard truths. And because she carried so much, he convinced himself that she would never set it down. But even the strongest arms get tired. Even the most patient soul reaches its limit. He didn't notice the small shifts, the quiet sighs, the pauses before she answered, the way she stopped explaining how she felt because she didn't think he was listening anymore. That's how loss works. It whispers before it walks. When she laughed less, he assumed she was just stressed. When she didn't fight back during arguments, he thought things were finally improving. When she started giving him the space he always said he needed, he didn't realize she was also giving herself permission to imagine a life without him. There's no alarm for those moments, no warning, just a series of tiny, almost invisible changes that add up to something irreversible. He kept thinking she would stay because she always had. And that's the dangerous thing, not seeing that loyalty has a breaking point. She didn't leave because she stopped caring. She left because she finally understood that caring alone wasn't enough to build a future. She needed effort, partnership, growth. She needed someone who didn't just love the idea of her, but saw the actual woman in front of him. The one with dreams, with fears, with a heart that wasn't designed to fix someone else while being slowly neglected. She didn't want to be a lifeline. She wanted to be a companion. And when he failed to see the difference, she realized she couldn't keep giving him pieces of herself that he wouldn't value until they were missing. A friend of mine once told me about a moment he'll never forget. Years after his breakup, he found an old photograph tucked in the back of a drawer. It was of him and the woman he lost, both younger, both smiling, both unaware of the cracks forming beneath them. He held the picture and said, "I didn't lose her the day she left. I lost her months before, when I ignored all the moments she was trying to stay." That's the kind of truth that doesn't go away. It stays with you. It reshapes you. It forces you to confront the fact that love doesn't disappear in a single dramatic explosion. It fades slowly like a light that flickers until the room is dark and you're standing there wondering when everything changed. He realized too late because he assumed her love was unconditional. But love isn't a bottomless well. Love requires awareness, presence, reciprocity. It needs two people who choose each other every day, not one person choosing and the other person assuming. She asked for so little and he gave even less, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't understand the rarity of what he had. He mistook her emotional strength for invulnerability. He mistook her kindness for tolerance. He mistook her patience for permanence. And by the time he learned the difference, she was gone. The thing people don't talk about enough is that losing someone like her doesn't feel like heartbreak at first. It feels like confusion, like disbelief, like reaching for something that used to be there and feeling only empty space. It's waking up in the morning and realizing there's no message from her. It's wanting to share good news and realizing she's not the person you get to tell anymore. It's hearing a song she loved and feeling your chest tighten because suddenly you understand all the words she tried to say. He replayed their memories like old film reels, searching for the moment he could have changed everything. But there isn't just one moment, it's thousands of tiny ones. Missed opportunities to appreciate her, to reassure her, to show up for her the way she showed up for him. And that's what hurts the most, the realization that she didn't want perfection, she just wanted effort. She wanted to feel chosen, she wanted to feel seen, she wanted to feel like she mattered beyond convenience or routine. By the time he understood all of this, she had already learned how to breathe without him. She had already rebuilt herself from the hurt he never meant to cause. She had already found peace in places he never bothered to look. And he was left with a truth that felt heavier than any goodbye. She wasn't like other women. She was exceptional. She was steady. She was rare. And he noticed her value only when her absence made the world feel quieter, colder, smaller. That's a lesson we often learn at the wrong time, that the people who give the most are usually the ones we take for granted. And when they leave, they don't slam doors or shout or make scenes. They leave with a calm that feels almost sacred because they tried. They stayed as long as they could. They loved with everything they had. And when that wasn't enough, they walked away with dignity, not rage. He realized too late. And the truth is, most people do. But if you're listening to this, maybe you still have time to appreciate the ones who stand by you, the ones who show up, the ones who love with depth, not conditions. Don't wait until they're gone to understand what they mean. Some hearts don't come around twice. In the end, his greatest lesson wasn't about heartbreak. It was about awareness, about finally understanding that love isn't something you're given, it's something you honor. It's a living, breathing connection that needs presence, effort, and gratitude. He realized too late that she wasn't just another person passing through his life. She was the rare kind of soul who shows you what real love looks like before you're mature enough to recognize it. And that's what stays with him. Not the grief, not the silence, not even the regret, but the clarity, the understanding that losing someone like her isn't a punishment. It's a wake-up call. It's an invitation to grow, to do better, to stop assuming that good hearts are infinite and unconditional, because they're not. They're gifts, and gifts don't wait forever to be appreciated. So if there's one truth to carry forward, it's this: don't wait for absence to teach you the value of presence. If someone shows up for you, show up back. If someone gives you their patience, give them your effort. If someone loves you with depth, don't meet them with neglect, because the most painful realization in life isn't that someone left. It's understanding you had everything you needed, and you didn't see it until it was gone. And by then, the chance to make it right has already walked away.